Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Can you hear me okay? My name is Terrence Mulligan. I'm the president and CEO of Napa Valley Community Foundation. I want to thank you so much for coming. I want to begin with just a few short words of gratitude before we get on with the program here. First, to Napa Valley College for hosting us, to the volunteer members of my board, past and present. Would you raise your hand? So we're a public charity governed by a bunch of local people. Thank you. To my colleagues on the staff, would you do that? Because, you know, we're putting on a show and it takes some work. Appreciate all that you've done to make today successful. Mostly to all of you for stepping up to join this conversation. As some of you already know, Napa Valley Community Foundation works side by side with local donors and nonprofits to tackle the most important challenges our valley faces. We believe that a prosperous community rises from a strong foundation, so every day we gather generous hearts and bright minds to solve the problems that lie just beneath the surface of this beautiful place we call home. Because when we're able to harness the power of your collective generosity, we become a force for good, making life better for everybody in the valley. With help from quite a number of you in this room, I'm proud to say that we've distributed more than $100 million in our 30-year history. Thank you. But beyond the basic thing, the most important thing of channeling resources to address issues, an important part of our job is to try to build a stronger sense of community, a more cohesive sense of community. And one way that we do that is by hosting these town hall meetings, which we do 4 times a year, always in an even-handed, nonpartisan way, always with the help of outside subject matter experts. Before I continue, I just want to say folks have been flyering outside, and that's A-okay by me, but we're not affiliated with those who have a point of view about whether what we're going to talk about is good or bad, right? So I just want to make it clear that the Community Foundation doesn't have a horse in this race, but I'll have a few things to say about that in just a moment. So housing. It's really hard to think of an issue in this region that will bear more squarely on our future success or frankly our future failure than the woeful lack of workforce housing that we enjoy in the North Bay. Nobody in Napa or Solano needs to be probably reminded of that. In fact, at the Community Foundation, we consider the lack of workforce housing to be the primary driver of family hardship and struggle in our community. Among the immigrants who constitute the backbone of our agricultural labor force, fully 2/3 spend more than 30% of their take-home pay to put a roof over their head, and many spend more than 50%. And increasingly, it strikes me that our strategy, if we have one, is to export our housing supply and import our labor force every day from less expensive neighboring communities, such as Solano County, Lake County, Sonoma County. So, this is the part where it becomes interactive. Can you do me a favor and raise your hand if you're my neighbor from Solano County someplace? Because we saw quite a lot of folks. Thank you so much for coming. This kind of reminds me of that scene at the end of the Blues Brothers where they say, you know, and we'd especially like to welcome all the members of the Illinois law enforcement community who have chosen to join us at the Palace Hotel Ballroom at this time. So we're delighted to see some friends from Solano. And I want to say something to my neighbors in Napa as well as my neighbors in Solano. We are not here to promote or endorse California Forever. Far from it. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and while we do sometimes take a stand on local issues, and here I forgot to mention that we have the mayor of Napa, Scott Sedgley, in the house, David Oro, a councilman from American Canyon. Please forgive me, gents. By local, we mean local. We mean Napa County. We're a bit like a Safeway shopping cart. You try to push us off the lot, and our wheels are going to turn sideways. It doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to other things. And certainly we've been watching events unfolding to our east, both with curiosity and concern. So we're curious about it because like everybody else who lives in California, we know it's long past time to do something bold and brave and better with respect to building more workforce housing. Those things are surely needed. And we're also concerned because it strikes us that what is happening in Solano County reminds me a bit of the way that Dorothy's house fell out of the sky in The Wizard of Oz and landed someplace with a thud and then bam, right into technicolor politics. Certainly we favor things that are involve the voice of community members and having some agency with respect to the decisions that will define a community rather than things that are in the same way that the house falls top down. And while you, my friends in Solano, might well like more housing or more dense housing, you might prefer that it be built within like city limits. And again, I've not talked to many of you. I don't know how you feel about that. So if you'll forgive me for stretching the Wizard of Oz analogy just a bit further to its breaking point. I'm really pleased to introduce to you tonight the man who identified the men behind the curtain, who's Conor Dougherty, who is sitting over there to my right, to share with us all like how is this coming to pass and who's behind it. Conor's been with the New York Times since 2014, and before that spent 10 years at the Wall Street Journal and some other places. And I became aware of your work when I read a piece you did in 2008 about the migration of wealthy families to rural places in California. And let's just say that I began to like and follow you in the old sense of the word, quite a while ago. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk, I have a few questions that we're going to talk about for, say, 20, 25 minutes, because nobody's that interesting for much longer than that. And then we want to open it up to questions. And I just want to emphasize, please be respectful. Please make them questions rather than editorial. It's a rare thing to have the guy who broke the national story on this thing so big in our presence tonight. We got him for like 45 minutes, right? So keep it short and do keep it civil. And we welcome people with whatever views you may have. My hope is that we'll emerge here tonight, all of us, with a better understanding of what California Forever is aiming to do and how they're aiming to do it. Why building anything, anywhere pretty much in California is so darn difficult and expensive, and where there might be, stepping back a bit, solutions for those of us who'd really like to see more housing, whether that's regulatory climate, factory-built units, or whatever it may be. So please help me extend a warm welcome to Conor.
I think that story that you were talking about took place in Idaho.
Yes, it did.
Okay. And what was funny about that is it was about a ski resort and how great they were, it was brand new and they were building it.
Closer.
And a couple years later, they had to repossess the ski lift. They brought a helicopter out and unbolt it and take it away because they couldn't pay the debt on it anymore.
Oh, goodness.
That story didn't work out.
So, for those who don't know, and I suspect there are very few who don't know in this room, can you just give us, the high level?
Yes.
What is California Forever? What are they aiming to do?
So, I guess we could start, and maybe we should just tell this as a story? I don't know. But there was obviously a lot of attention about out there in the eastern corner of Solano County, which many of us who grew up in the Bay Area, as I did, I went to Lineage High. I lived in San Francisco before that. The eastern part of Solano County, where it feels kind of more like the Central Valley than the more coastal Bay Area. And you get out there, and it's a lot of families who've been there for many generations, and sort of all know each other, and are certainly very familiar when someone's buying a lot of land. And out of nowhere, a company that nobody has heard of, has no discernible business, and no identifiable principles, pretty much a ghost, just starts buying all this land. And, it's a couple thousand acres, and it's 10,000 more, and pretty soon they own about 60,000 acres, which is a little more than twice the size of San Francisco, and they're very quickly the largest landowner in the county. I think this probably would have become a much bigger deal. They started around 2017, 2018. I think it probably would have become a much bigger deal much faster, except for that there was a global pandemic right in the middle of that. So from 2020 to 2022, when they were doing a lot of their buying, there wasn't that much attention on it. Now, to my dear friends from Solano here, I know that your Facebook feeds were lighting up with it, and I know that a lot of the local media was talking about it. So, which is great. I just meant it was not like just throbbing nationally the way it might have. So anyway, ultimately, there was a huge question: who is this? There was speculation it might be spies, because obviously the land out there is by Travis Air Force Base. But ultimately, one day I was able to find out methods I can't fully get into, but I got a tip. And I was able to, it took more than that, but that was definitely the genesis, that this was actually a bunch of really kind of well-known Silicon Valley people, and that they had backed a guy named Jan Sremek, that his name was in the original and that they were behind this, and that they had a plan to build a new city in the middle of Solano County. And as you all know, probably since then, they have come forth publicly with that plan now and are trying to pass a ballot initiative in November, when there will be other elections taking place as well. And you know, without getting too in the weeds, but as you guys all, as many of you I'm sure know, the initiative wouldn't say, oh, this is happening. It would essentially, I don't know if rescind is the right word, but it would alter a county ordinance that says you have to build in cities, basically. So,
and so that
and that would then presumably set the stage for them to have many, many, many more votes and many, many, many more steps, all of which could kill the thing.
like
so,
state, there's above the county, or there, like what
we can get into that. I don't actually know. There's a lot of different ways you can see this going. My only point is this: it's not as if this election is like yay, nay.
Yeah.
That's all I'm trying to sort of say.
Can you tell us about, so the, okay.
Well, it's definitely a yay, but it's not a yay.
Yeah, if it's a no, it's a no.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's a yes, it's just a
I'm not saying it would never, that would be the end of it if it were a no, because I doubt it would be. I just meant no is pretty definitive and yes is kind of, well, maybe.
So, California's been around for a few minutes, right? And I don't know, what was the population in 1970? Probably like 22 million or 18. It's grown a bit. And I think about places like Foster City, a planned community from 1958, or the San Fernando Valley that was orange groves until it wasn't. And tell us about how things have changed. In other words, like, didn't we used to do it this way? Like, maybe before we cared as much about ag or the climate or whatever, but wasn't that sort of the strategy in post-World War II America when Pat Brown was like, by God, I'll have an aqueduct and I'll have 30 new dams, and like, that's just what we did, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the brief, long history of California is that, you know, pretty much from the beginning, from the gold rush on, people sent advertisements back to the East Coast saying, you know, come out here and buy stuff, come out, come here, live here, you'll have an orange tree, you'll have whatever. And in post-war, you know, post-World War II America, when the suburban sort of explosion was happening, the state obviously grew tremendously fast, and it went from, I mean, obviously it was growing over all that period, but it became, suddenly it's adding millions of people per decade, became the largest state in the union. They had a big party, a statewide party in 1963 that a lot of people were very unhappy about, to celebrate it surpassing. I think they put a counter up on the Bay Bridge that had like a rolling thing of New York versus California. And that made people really unhappy. It seemed like it was too much, it seemed like it was too crazy. And it's really interesting that you should bring up Foster City, because Foster City is basically landfill. They filled in part of the bay. And one of the original environmental movements at that time was Save the Bay, because they were very worried they would fill in pretty much the whole thing. So I think most people would say that that was generally a good impulse. They might have gone a little over the top with that, and there was this sort of logic of like, we're going to build freeways so the houses so that we could build freeways to you know, just there was never a more cohesive plan of what it was going to be. But of course, all the things we, as a state, have over the many decades since then put in place to not make it seem so uncontrolled and filling in bays with concrete and stuff like that. That's all the things we put in place to prevent that from happening made it really hard to build like a duplex in a relatively dense neighborhood, you know. And so now we as a state are having this fight with ourselves really about how we're gonna figure this out, because housing is too much. It's obviously tremendously difficult on workers. Entire restaurants and stuff are changing their business models completely. I mean, it's amazing. It's not even just housing. If you look at all the different ways businesses have like totally altered how they go about things because they want to cut their labor cost. You know, there's all these different ways in which housing has sort of been affected us and we need to figure out a way out of it. That is not endorsing any particular approach, but I think we can all agree there's a problem with housing.
Totally.
I hope we can all agree.
Yeah.
And if we can't, I want to hang out with that person.
We'll just stipulate. We'll stipulate. So, what do the proponents of California Forever have to say about the why and the benefits to the community and so forth? Like, what's their case? Is it merely as you said in your piece, a backlash to the backlash, and like we're too rule bound, and we need to get back to a place where we're doing things that are, 2 deltas away from the middle of the bell curve? Like, what do they?
I guess I would say, so the specific benefits is kind of like a political question. I mean, not that I'm not engaging it, but I just meant they have a whole package of things they say they're going to do, whatever. But I think the larger thing, the larger idea is that if you're going to really take a bite out of the housing problem, you need to revive what's called greenfield development, which is a really nerdy way of saying building in the middle of nowhere. No offense to anyone who lives out there. I meant building in a place where there are not currently a bunch of houses. For obvious reasons, efficiency and just people not being, that's obviously much easier than driving a truck and trying to make left turns in traffic and whatever, building in a neighborhood. I mean, anybody who's walked through San Francisco and seen them trying to build a skyscraper in the middle of the city can tell you it's building in the middle of a place that exists is quite a bit harder and more expensive than building in the middle of a place that is less populated. But of course, people hate that because they hate sprawl, and that for good reason, for all the reasons we just said, filling in Foster City and whatever else. No offense again, my mom's cousin lives in Foster City, so I don't have any problem with Foster City. I'm just saying they did throw a bunch of concrete in to build the landfill. So anyway, what I'm saying is that their premise is that the only real way to take a serious bite out of this problem is to revive this idea of greenfield, but to do it in a different way, which is to build a new place that's, certainly has all the characteristics of what people malign as sprawl, but to do it in a way where once you get there, once it's built, it'd be more dense and all that. That's the plan, as we all know from the ski resort anecdote that I just began with. The plans don't always go according to plan, but that's the pitch as of now.
How about those who are in opposition? What are the sort of things that they say about their opposition to the idea?
Well, there's both the personal and the political. On the more personal level, obviously many of the farmers who've been there for, in some cases, many generations have been sued. Their families have been through tremendous stress financially and emotionally. So they don't consider that neighborly, to put it that way. I think the more, I guess, I don't know what you want to call it, political kind of planning point is that why should we want to build in a place that we've sealed off from development because it has agricultural land and that kind of can't ever be really put back into the world. Why would we do that there when we have cities that we could build around? So that's the argument. I think where you end, if you just push these against each other, is that there is going to exist this pressure to keep doing this, whether it's California Forever or something else, as long as it's really difficult to attack this housing problem near the job center. So figuring out some way around that is probably what the state is going to have to do, because if you don't, you got to relieve the pressure somehow, or this will keep happening. One thing I would note, this is maybe less relevant to this immediate area, but is, we are, if you look at the fastest growing cities in California, they're like Lathrop, which which is, you know, out there by Tracy, not too far from the 5, where you go down to, I say the 5 now, I moved to LA. Interstate 5, as I said, I-5, as I said growing up. The thing.
I know.
It infected me, and I can't get away from it. It's out there, right? And if you go out there, though, you see Tracy Hills, and so we are obviously building a ton of. California is building a lot of subdivisions on open agricultural land right now. So it's not as if we don't do this, but as everyone here will, I'm sure, note later, Solano has Solano does not do that, and it has a county ordinance that says we don't want to do that. So.
I mean, I'm curious, and we're going to open it up in just a minute or two, but the sort of like one thing that I think of as a deeply provincial character, you know, like we're in a rural place. It's high amenity rural, but rural it is nonetheless, and it's ag and hospitality. Those are the twin engines of our economy. And I think about the fact that in American philanthropy, it's been true for 120 years that fortunes are built in urban centers. And generally they stay there, right? So like, why does Cincinnati have a beautiful symphony orchestra? Why does Cleveland have a world-class museum? Well, it's oil and steel and ball bearings. And so this
Cincinnati has Star Wars figures, but.
Is that right?
No, it's like whatever company got the like Star Wars figures is like has the biggest skyscraper in town.
That's fantastic.
Kenner, I think it's called.
Okay, not Mattel. And so that tension between urban places and rural places, and the wealth inequality that is often associated with that tension, and I mean, let's face it, there is no place that seems to generate more wealth in America at this moment than Silicon Valley, which is sort of what Cleveland was 100 years ago, right?
It's funny you should say that, because I always think about that when in the urban-rural mix that you're talking about, because like when you walk around New York, man, there's a lot of rich people here. But maybe I could get some of it. You know, like there's you know, whereas you go to like Napa or Santa Barbara and you're like, there's a lot of rich people here, you better show up with it.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not, there's no ladder here, you know, so, and you know, obviously you should, I don't know how, I mean, that's a hard, I'm half making a joke, but that's a very hard aspect of a high amenity place, because there's not this like great ladder upward the way there is in places where there's, you know, these big companies where people are moving through all the time. So
yeah, I guess my theory would be that if a group of rural people, whether wealthy or not, had come together with this idea, it might be received differently than sort of folks from the outside.
Well, so, yes, and maybe I should, sorry, I figured everyone knew. There was a tremendous amount of secrecy around this. When I wrote the story, people were quite shocked. And obviously, when a developer does a project, they come in with a lot of honey before they even have a plan. You know, so, I mean, they spend all this time, I mean, this can be controversial for other reasons, but they spend all this time whining and dining and getting to know local elected officials, which again, there's, you know, many novels, movies, and everything about the chicanery that can go on there, but that's usually how it goes. And in this case, I think they really started off, I mean, I think they would admit that they started off on the back foot, as they say, or in a position of people not liking them. And that is very atypical. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sorry, it's not atypical that people don't like a developer, that's typical. But it is atypical for someone to not come in with a charm offensive long before they ever propose anything. So I think now we're seeing that, and whether that's a new strategy that will prove itself, or there's a reason why nobody ever did it that way, we'll find that out.
So my last question before we open it up is on that very thing, the sort of the retrospective charm offensive, or the current one that might have been done earlier. Is it charm to all, or are there particular segments of the Solano community? I mean, everyday residents who might vote, organized labor who might get jobs, elected officials, like to whom are they directing their beam of energy and persuasion?
lines and doing the math, the election will functionally be in Vacaville, Fairfield, and Blair. It will not be in Rio Vista, where there's about 10,000 people, as opposed to those other three, which have like, I don't know, 350,000 or something like that. I mean, between them. So I think that things like jobs, things like alleviating the sort of countywide housing pressure, things like trying to, their overall pitch is plainly to the county and is obviously directed at making someone who lives in Vallejo, Vacaville, or Fairfield feel more warmly towards it than, say, directed at Rio Vista. So I would say that pitch is more about like jobs, it's about future, it's about relieving pressure on the county. I'm not here to endorse any of that, I'm just saying purely as a matter of strategy, that seems to be what they're up to. Obviously they have very specific benefits that you can go read about on billboards if you aren't too busy driving and texting while you're passing. But I think I just passed one today that was like 400 million in benefits for whatever it was, right? So there's those specific pitches, but I think the overall like message they're trying to press is more of a countywide one.
Copy. Thank you. So I think let's open it up for questions, and we're just going to try to get around. My colleagues have 2 mics over here, and don't worry if you don't have any. I've got some more, but I suspect you'll have some. So we're just going to take you in turn, and thank you for the house lights. So this.
Don't kill the messenger is mine. Or you know what? Scream all you want, just don't.
Hi, I'm curious, like, the greenfield growth that happened in the Bay Area was the east side of East Bay, in the 80s and the 90s and all,
Yeah.
Tri-Valley.
I mean, obviously the Silicon Valley was at one point apricots and whatever else, but.
But I'll leave the Central Valley, but like, and what's interesting is how there's been a big demographic shift with that. Like, those areas are browner than they once were. I don't know with what we're thinking about building out in this area of the county, how you think it would play out demographically. Is there a point of trying to look rural and old town and white in what is being pitched here? And
You're saying, do I think that this is going to be a wealthier, whiter town?
or if that's part of where they're seeing.
I don't. First off, this state is on a. We as a country, we as a world, and definitely we as a state are going to be a more diverse place going forward, no matter what happens. Now, as you point out, there might be there will definitely be pockets that, with like Marin County or whatever, that will remain, let's say, less diverse. So, based on where they want to build, and based on all the other things, it's probably going to be, I don't want to say affordable in a pitch kind of way, but just like based on where it's at, I would guess that buying or renting housing out there would cost less than buying or renting housing in Napa or San Francisco. I mean, have you been there? No offense, Alan, but it's windy, it's hot, and the river is quite beautiful. I mean, it's wonderful. I just meant it's not there. What? Yeah, it's wonderful, but it is not currently the kind of place where land is super highly valued and high amenity and whatever. So, I guess what I'm saying is there's nothing to lead me in that direction right now. And that's just like all so far off, right? You know what I mean? Like once you start seeing what they actually try to build and what it actually looks like and what level of employment and stuff they were, again, I don't even want to like act like all that's faded. I just meant there's so many things you would have to know before you would get there. And also the state is just going to be more diverse.
Great. Let's see. Bruce, over here.
Maybe you can help me formulate this question better, but it seemed that we were in an era after World War II of development, growth, progress. I mean, certain attitudes that people saw for a better future. And I remember the development in certain areas, like Terra Linda was the Freitas Ranch, and it turned into an area. My brother went to Irvine, it was a Boy Scout jamboree, and then they developed Irvine Ranch into houses. Levittown was highly promoted in the New York area, that it was this new area and development and progress in the future, and hope and optimistic things, and it was done in a way that allowed people to make some changes. One of the things in Levittown was that it did allow African Americans to move into the area. So I'm asking that question about, are we in a conflict maybe between giving up that aspect of the American dream, or is this a fulfillment of the American dream by these people who are obviously going to make money out of it, but they may well provide for a thriving opportunity for people? Again, I don't know if I formulated the question right, but please.
Totally. Okay, not to get into like a whole history lesson, but the racial history of Levittown is quite bad. Just to clear up that record, he's got some quotes in Life magazine that you can go find that are about as bad as they get. So, but it's changed today, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people who live there who are, you know, just like in all sorts of neighborhoods, who are happy with the neighborhood they have now. I think that there was, okay, first off, I was born in 1977, so I don't have like a really firsthand knowledge of the 50s and 60s, although I've read a ton about it. There was a sense of optimism and growth, and perhaps maybe in a more craven way, politicians at that time thought voters wanted that. I mean, Pat Brown, you know, would like trumpet, we're growing faster than New York, we're adding all these people. So there was definitely a sense that growth was good, and growth, of course, at that time meant let's build the University of California, let's build a 350-mile river to LA. That one was unpopular, but it got unpopular. Or here, anyway. But, so I think that there was that. The way that they did it, with cars dominating everything, I'm not trying to be anti-car, but I'm just sort of like the whole, like, I'm gonna drive across the street to the big box store because I'm too scared to walk across the crosswalk. Like, that style of, like, impenetrability, I think that people eventually got to a place where they're like, I don't want to live that way. There's speeches from Lyndon Johnson around that time calling it ugly America, and we need to get past that. So people were obviously unhappy with it. I just think we haven't really replaced it. We found it wasn't going the right way, and I think, you know, if you look at a lot of the environmental cost and whatever from that time, or just also the human cost, like it's very isolated, it's not very community building. But I also think that we never tried to replace it. It became like, and if you just look at how our laws changed, our laws became very good at no, and not very good at like, well, what should we do instead, right? And so I do think that reviving that sense of optimism and not being like terrified of the future all the time is something that we should, that we would be better off, you know, having, but that doesn't mean I'm endorsing this specific thing. It just means I do think like when our only default is, oh, this isn't the way I want to do it, so no, as opposed to, okay, I recognize there's a problem here, and here's my alternate solution. I don't know, politics doesn't have a great gear for that, but something like that I think would be preferable, and I don't think we would be here if we had that.
Let's see, Chris, and then the lady here, and then the gentleman back there. Unless I missed it, did I miss it? Julie, can you help me, because I can't see very well.
Well, we're sort of trading off sides.
Okay, well, let's trade off sides for heaven's sakes. All right. All right, hello, I'm Aiden.
Hi, how are you? Good, how are you?
Good.
Sure.
I have a Google alert set, but it's not that good.
So in that, he was asked what his biggest mistake so far was in this whole process. And what he said was his biggest mistake was your story being made.
I
What do you
heard him
think
say
about-
something similar on Kara Swisher's podcast, so.
What do you think about that type of mindset where, you know, he's done things like suing farmers, switched up on stuff that he's told the public, but yet his biggest mistake is you having your story put out there?
So there's a lot of loaded in that question, but that's why I love your age. I think that if there's a sentiment in that answer that you seem to object to, and that is definitely putting them on the back foot, it's that they weren't able to like roll this out in the orchestrated way that they wanted to. And I think that most people, most developers, pretty much every developer would tell you that the normal way you go about this is you make a bunch of bonds in the community first, and then you try to build the thing. Now, that's an idealized view of the world. Obviously, developers do that all the time, and people just tell them to go jump in a lake, to put it kindly. But I think what you're pointing to is that he wanted to have a highly orchestrated thing after having been secretive, and that, you know, that this wasn't, that you were never, that after all that secrecy and all the things like the lawsuits, nobody was ever going to greet them. So I don't know if I'm answering your question the right way, but I think it does. I think what you're pointing out is that it's definitely a backwards approach, and I don't mean backwards in a value judgment. I mean that's just like not really the sequence of how people do it.
Back over here.
So, my question is about the jobs, because here in Vallejo, Gian has his headquarters there in Vallejo, and he's selling his main selling point to the people of Vallejo is that there will be jobs created, and I was wondering if that was going to be kind of an insular dynamic after a while, if the jobs will mainly be for the people there, because we have a huge exodus of people every day to Marin from Vallejo because it's economically depressed.
So if they were to get permission, which would be like a massive infrastructure build, if they were to start spending money on bonds and widening freeways and all the things that you'd have to do, that would obviously create jobs. And they'd probably be trade jobs, or they'd be mostly trade jobs at first.
At first.
Yeah, I mean, they presumably would be there for years, right? I mean, so I'm not, again, that's not an endorsement, it's just to say, if they actually built this thing, there would obviously be jobs. So,
Would they be more for the people?
I would think at first they would be trades, right? I mean, I'm not an expert, but they have to build the road, and they have to build, they have to grade the area, and they have to put in all the things you put in before you can even start thinking about having a street, to say nothing of water and all the things we need. I mean, it's funny, I was thinking about water, not just because I'm in California, but like, there are all these ways you can like live off the grid now. Maybe in a couple years you could build a city off the grid or a small one, but like you still need a lot of pipes and things to make it all go. So I would think at first they would be trade jobs, just because the thing that does not exist has to be built. Afterward, but the bigger question, and you're asking it in a way that's interesting, is whether or not they actually would attract jobs there, right? Like, meaning, I don't know that some tech company actually wants to build, you know, a headquarters out there or a satellite office out there or whatever. That's part of the pitch, but I don't know if that's going to happen, you know. So,
Is there a climate piece to the pitch? Like, this
yeah,
would be
I mean,
a dense, walkable, get us away from
yeah. Sorry, I thought I said that. There are pitches that will be solar powered, climate friendly, whatever. And I'm not, you know, building new places that are more, how do I put this? That are more, that have a less intensity of car use is not a bad idea. You know, if they were to build Tracy Hills or any of these other places, no offense to anyone who lives there, but you know, that way that would obviously be good. You know, it's weird. This is a complete aside. I probably shouldn't go down this road, but today's suburbs are actually built quite a bit denser than many of yesterday's cities. If you go out to like San Bernardino, where I've suddenly been spending a lot of time, I mean, they're building like 30-ish units per acre. Now, they're not super, again, no offense to anyone, they're not super well designed. I mean, it's like garages around these things, you know, like it's designed to have as many cars as humanly possible. But the actual density of some of those new developments are easily as dense as, like, you know, Noe Valley or some part of San Francisco. So we actually are building a more dense world already. I think we just need to sort of design it differently. And I'm not saying this is that. I mean, what they've proposed does feel like that. Will they get there? Is it going to actually be that? Is not my, that's not something I'm forecasting.
I'm wondering if you took any time to look at alternatives. I understand the history, I understand the problem of housing, but did you take the chance to look at and think about other alternatives in Northern California that might solve some of these issues? As San Francisco empties out, I have great visions of what Market Street could be and how many units could be provided there. And I think all of these decisions moving forward have to be looked at through the lens of climate change and the climate crisis. So my question is, have you looked at alternatives?
So, not in any, short answer, no. It's not really my job not to punt on that. So no. That said, obviously the alternative, which you pointed to, is to build more in cities or build more in places that are already built out. I guess but the one thing I would say to you is, like, I don't think you can just point to a specific neighborhood, like, oh, let's all do it on Market Street, or because let me tell you, the people there will have some thoughts. But we can try to craft a policy. The state can and is trying to craft a policy that says we're going to make it way easier to build in cities that already exist. So that is ongoing, and it is being as furiously opposed as California Forever. But I guess what I would say is, I think that your thought process is pretty much where people are. Why don't we think about places that are already built out? But I think that it has to be, like a click above what you're saying, meaning instead of it being, there's that specific neighborhood that's having a tough time with commercial real estate, it's like more like, okay, here are urbanized areas, and we're going to try to come up with a policy that will change that, or that will make that easier. But, you know, just to be clear, downtown Napa is probably going to be on that list. So, you know, and I'm sure that there are plenty of people in downtown Napa, many of whom I'm dear friends with, might not like that either. So it's always a process. And you know, it's funny, when I was doing my book, Jerry Brown said to me, well, you know, cows have a way of not complaining as much as people do.
It sounds like Jared.
Yeah. Chris?
Thank you. This is a great discussion, and I want to preface my question with my view that back in almost 80 years ago, the debate between Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses over death and life of American cities, I think became a myth-making that was disproven by following the money. Because shortly after that, you also saw the examples of building businesses and housing around the beltways of cities, such as in the Dulles Airport area of Washington, D.C. And of course, you mentioned the San Fernando Valley, the planned development of California. My question is California forever likely built on another myth of this type of large-scale, top-down development that will be disproven by the money not following?
It will definitely be proven or not proven by the money following. Well, or not following. No, what I mean by that, so what you're referring to, I happen to have read all the books that you just like rattled off, but I'm guessing most people here did not. So Jane Jacobs was a activist in the West Village of New York, and when they wanted to build a freeway through the middle of it, she fought very hard and was successful, which most people in New York City at that time were not. And then they built Long Island and whatever, just the giant, they built Queens. It's funny, if you look at the old pictures, they're like, well, here's a train to nowhere, and it's a train to the middle of what is now Queens. So sometimes the train to nowhere works out. And so what you seem to be saying, it almost seemed like when you were like pro-Beltway.
No, I'm just saying the fact of life is that
Yeah.
money went to the
No, if the money, look, that's kind of what I was alluding to, I'm sorry, with the other gentleman's question about commercial real estate. The point is, if a bunch of employers show up and you really can have a city of several thousand people with a mix of commercial, residential, and I don't just mean retail, not that there's anything wrong with retail, you need that too, but you know, a mix of commercial, industrial, retail, if that really happened, like that, then I think it would probably become like a self-sustaining engine at that point. But that is obviously a big if, right? So
still to be proven.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my money to lose. So if someone wants to take a gambit on it, that's between them and their billions of dollars that they already have. But and obviously it's between them and the voters of Solano County and all that. But I just meant them losing money or not, I don't care. It's more like in fact, it's funny. I mean, it's a whole other thing, but I sometimes think it's good when developers lose money. No offense to developers, but like sometimes we have these cycles where people build too much housing and they lose their money, but what really happens? Like the bank buys it for 30 cents and then resells it, and everyone gets like a discount. Like that works for me.
Let's take maybe 3 more questions. Conor's been gracious enough to whisper at me that he can hang out a little longer, but I want to respect the clock and try to wrap around 7. So we'll take 2 or 3, maybe 2 from each side, and then we'll applaud. And then those of you who want to stay can come.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that the American dream is and always has been a myth, and that I also don't particularly care for the implicit denigration of trades and trade jobs that was happening earlier. But my question really is, well, preface it with a statement. Agricultural production in the United States is not sufficient to feed our nation, and it is becoming less able to feed our nation. What sense does it make as public policy to exchange agricultural insecurity for attempting to solve what we call the housing crisis?
So I hope you don't think I was denigrating trade jobs, because I'm all for trade jobs. They're
No, I didn't think you
essentially the
thought about
largest
that
private
question
sector union
earlier.
job we have.
Yeah.
Okay, just to be clear about that. I don't have, I'm not smart enough to know the answer to that question. I mean, what you're saying is that we have to weigh the preciousness of agricultural. Basically, it can't be, agricultural land can't be replaced. I mean, maybe in some theoretical way it could, but not in an easy way. And we need to weigh that against sprawl, basically. I mean, that's essentially what Solano County's law is trying to do. And as I sort of just returned before, well, here's the bigger thing. California has essentially said what you just said. I mean, we have been talking as a state about smart growth and anti-sprawl and all these different things since the 70s, but we just don't do it. And the reason is, we kind of do it, but not really. And the reason is, sprawl is a very weird thing in that it's this thing that everyone hates, and then you propose for them an alternative, and they go, well, I hate that more. You know, the cows complain less than the people do. And so it just kind of goes. So I think that not only is what you said quite reasonable, it's sort of what everyone's always saying, but when you really bring it down to the level of a voter, they just don't like it. They're worried about parking on the street. They're worried about all these things, right? And figuring our way out of that is sort of our charge. And you know, people always say, well, California's built out, and it is in some ways. I mean, not really, but existing places are obviously populated. But people, of course, go to Phoenix, which is not, shall we say, an urban planning paradise. I like Phoenix, I should say. I was just there a couple months ago, but it's, you know, there's a lot of cars and air conditioners. It's certainly not going to fight the climate crisis. So I guess what I'm saying is, most people agree with everything you just said, but actually getting people to say, well, then I'm going to live by that is the nut.
And if I said anything that offended you around labor, I apologize. My father was a school teacher, and he drove a rainbow bread truck in the summer. And to do that, he became a Teamster 3 months of the year. That's why I had dental insurance as a kid. And that combination also explains my lifelong affinity for baked goods as well as organized labor. Maybe one more. We have one more over here. But how about the gentleman down front?
I'm happy to take those two,
Yeah,
but
sure.
it's up to you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, I have a salsa company, and we distribute out of Fairfield. And I think that Fairfield is the Belgium of the Bay Area, because you have equal accessibility to Sacramento, Marin County, San Francisco, San Jose, with all the freeways. The thing that worries me is that the demographic that would benefit from a city like California Forever would be someone who could make money texting or Zooming. And I think that the industry that would benefit from that would be the tech industry. So you're creating a city for management, for your tech management, right? And I think we're going to be creating cities that are going to be benefiting a certain demographic of people who would just isolate themselves with the ability to make a lot of money, staying at home, having access to Lake Tahoe and Berkeley and Stanford and the beauty of San Francisco. So I think that what I see the nefarious mission is to create a society where very few people would benefit from it. And then that would follow in other places once the prototype is created.
So I'm not trying to take their position on this or whatever, right? But I don't know that we know that. But I'm not saying I don't know that we know that because we don't know anything, right? Like
Who's funding it?
Exactly. Well, we know who's funding it, but I just meant you don't know who's going to show up. Like they're like for rent.
Their employees
I
are
mean,
gonna attract the vote from
Yeah,
everyone in the
but
world.
like, will they? You know what I mean? Like, what I'm saying is that it might turn out to be something totally different. I'm not saying that means it's a great idea. I just meant it might be. What I'm almost saying is like you're almost giving them too much. Like it might be a total disaster financially, but great in other ways. I don't really know. But what I'm saying is that the crystal vision of the plan. I don't even know that we know that that's gonna happen. So I get, my point is to get what you're saying, but you're responding to a rendering. And I think that's almost giving the plan too much credit to it.
I just can't justify their benevolence.
Oh no, I don't think
Why are they spending all this money on this?
So, I'm with you on that. But most people, I try to be a little bit chill about the profit-making piece of it, because whatever, you run a salsa business, most people are engaged in some version of profit-making or are employed by it, and that doesn't have to be inherently bad. You can hate the plan for all sorts of other reasons, right? I try to be somewhat careful of that, just because pretty soon everything's bad, right? So anyway,
Just another quick process check. So we're just gonna run until 1/4 and anybody who's like, I'm gonna be late for dinner, just please go ahead and go. Because we always try to end right at 7 and we won't be offended.
yeah, I won't be.
Yeah.
I thought there was one there.
My name is Ann, and I'm from Solano County. And one of the concerns I had, I also watched that Bloomberg event that
God, I gotta watch this.
was speaking at, and he made some kind of real telling remarks. He talked about to the audience that he kind of did a little mini survey of the audience to see if anybody had heard about this project and all this stuff. It turns out, well, they're in San Francisco, and nobody was opposed to it. Surprisingly, there's just a little fraction of people that were opposed to it. And he mentioned, well, this is what I found rather dismissive, the way he spoke. He said that many of you probably aren't too familiar with the area unless you've driven through it on your way to Tahoe. Which brings me to my point that we already have gridlock on I-80 practically every day. Everybody coming from the Bay Area on their way, well, especially on Thursdays and Fridays. You don't even get on the freeway, you know better. If you live in Fairfield, you don't get on the freeway on Friday because all those people from Silicon Valley, from San Francisco, and the rest of the inner Bay Area are on their way to Tahoe, passing by where we live and not giving it much thought. Oh, yeah, that's Solano County. So he was kind of like really giving us a feel that that's what he thinks of us. And I felt, okay, so my other question, you mentioned that they're going to build the roads, they're going to build the infrastructure and all that. Well, he made a point of saying, we'll pay our fair share and the rest will be up to Solano County residents. So we taxpayers are going to be stuck paying for his dream. And so I think that should be pointed out. Also, I hope you're going to continue doing these investigations because thank you for doing it. Thank you for pointing it out to us. We'd be up a creek not knowing about this. So that's my point. So
Okay.
I hope you do continue.
Okay, thanks.
Let's see, woman right here.
So it seems that the city of Mountain Home was
Yes, comes up.
created similarly or
Yes.
had similar aspirations. And I'm wondering if you've, you know, in researching it, you know, if California Forever should have some lessons from Mountain Home, if there's any similarities and maybe predictions on what's going to happen.
Mountain Home didn't work out that well, which is what you're alluding to. That said, Irvine Ranch, which is, I know, the model they all look at, worked out. I mean, we could get into a qualitative judgment, but it was a success of housing and everything. I guess I'm not, once again, I'm not trying to sell this, right? There's all sorts of reasons for the voters of Solano County to say, we don't want to sprawl, we don't want, you know, all those things. The one thing I would say is that we are as I think if there's one thing we could take from this idea that that is worth, I think, listening to, even if you hate this particular project, is that California is building subdivisions on greenfield all the time. Again, you can drive out to Tracy or in LA, you know, just keep driving east. They're now going to build this, which is sort of fascinating, but this like train from to Vegas, and I'm sure there will be a whole bunch of stuff that will erupt along it. Certainly the owner of the train line is buying land as if they think that will occur. So that's going to happen. We're going to, you know, and if you have the bigger global view of Florida and Arizona and Texas, you know, this sort of American car-dominated subdivision, we're going to build a ton more of that. That's most of what we do pretty much all the time. If that's going to happen, which it is, but people sort of looked at something like another good example that you left out is, God, I can't forget the name. I think it's called Seaside in Florida, but it was like a new urbanism community built. If people are like, look, we're gonna build a lot of new stuff, kind of on greenfield, but let's think about how we build it. I think, and let's think about how we can make it less car-centric. And yeah, people are gonna drive their cars are great. They're gonna drive in places, but maybe they don't have to do it for like every single thing, and maybe their block isn't as dangerous as mine is. Where I got my little look out for the kids signs everywhere. I think that idea is not a bad. That seems like an idea worth listening to. Even if you're like, sure, I'll take your design advice, but don't build it there. You know what I'm saying. So I guess my answer to you is that I don't know the specific. I don't want to go down a road of getting into all the specifics that Mountain House might not have done, or Irvine Ranch did do, or my favorite. Raise your hand if you've ever been to California City, which is quite an experience. I don't even know that they paved the roads, but they have. Well, some of them are. I went out there one day. I just wanted to see it. It was like 100 miles, and I like stacked a bunch of phone calls and drove out there. And it's like a liquor store in the dirt. Is basically what it is. California City is a place kind of near Edwards Air Force Base. What is it about Air Force bases? And that you can see if you go to a Google Earth, like they laid out all the streets, but nobody showed up. So besides the liquor store, but. So what I'm saying is that looking at those specific like government approaches, whether or not they worked or not worked, I don't know if this will be that or not that. Generally speaking, as you've alluded to, the history of that is not good. At the same time, we are constantly always building new subdivisions. So if you want to think of this as like an actual attempt to build a real new city, that's like one place that your brain can go. But you could also be like, but we're building subdivisions all the time, and some of them are quite large. And if we're going to be doing that, thinking about how we do that in a more, I'm using loaded words like sustainable, but like in a different kind of way, that feels like an idea worth kind of holding on to.
Yeah, I just thought they seem very similar, and they're in proximity. They're dealing with the same population in the Greater Bay Area, and why will it work in Solano County if it didn't work in,
I don't know.
in Mountain Home?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get into forecasting success or non-success. But yeah.
I've got a forecast for you.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of signed books that this wonderful man wrote. I mean, not enough for everybody, mind.
Al, you can ask me a question anytime you want. You know that.
So I just want to say, how about a round of applause? He's going to stick around. So just come out. Thank you for coming. And do pick up the book on the way out. I hope it doesn't cost fisticuffs. So we have like 50 or 60, and there's 100 and some odd of you. But thank you so much, Conor, for this, and
Thank
come
you.
on up if you want to talk about it.